We're joined today by Amelia Meath of Sylvan Esso. The new album is Free Love. Congratulations on this record. It's just really fabulous. It's really great.
Thank you so much. That means that it's so wonderful to hear feedback because our normal way of getting feedback is gone now. So it
Yeah,
means
yeah.
the world to me when I get to hear that people are listening.
You know, the thing that I thought about with this record a lot is that, my wife and I, like I kind of come from that singer-songwriter, that love of that music, and she has a life of dance. And this is a record that really sort of meets in the middle for us.
Thank you. That means that is so. That is it was definitely an intention that we wanted to have. So it's great to hear.
The other thing that I thought about is with this record a lot is that, like, if you just look at entertainment in general, so much of it is based around conflict or contrast. And, yes, there's beauty and there's sex and there are some other things, but if you just break it down, conflict is such a huge thing. And you all have made it really obvious in most of the press that you've done around this record that you really welcome conflict into the studio, the small arguments, the ones that aren't about a power dynamic, but just, artistic choices.
I think that friction is at the heart of all good collaboration. It's the bouncing the ideas off of each other, the push and pull of the creative impulse that is what makes something new, I think. And that's what you're always constantly searching for over and over again as a lifelong artist with a career, when you're what you want is the new.
So Nick, the other half of Sylvan Esso, who couldn't join us today, has been quoted as saying he's grateful to you for bringing conflict into his life, bringing argument into his life, which I think
Mhm.
is such a funny thing to say, but I kind of get it.
Yeah, he's from, we come from, I'm Northeastern and he's from the Midwest. So there's two very different intrinsic approaches to life. And I think we've met in the middle in a lot of ways. Conflict was really new to Nick when our creative partnership began, and now it's the thing that we thrive off of.
Yeah, isn't that funny? And of course, started off coming from Mountain Man, him coming from Megaphon. It's such an interesting thing to make music that to you, it seems like it's kind of just a new take on the same thing, but for our ears, it's also different. That collaboration really starting with a remix that Nick did on Mountain Man's Play It Right.
Indeed. Indeed, it took him a while to get him to do it. It took him at least a year and a half. I had to bother him a lot about it.
Well, what was his holdup?
I think he wanted it to be. I think like with so when you're like a young creative person, I think he was being too precious with it and really wanted it to be good. So being able to have his friend, me, kind of chuck him in the shoulder and be like, just do it, just do the thing, really ultimately led to our partnership. So I'm so grateful for it.
We have played Ferris wheel a lot, and I was interested in the origin story. It's not hard to imagine, adolescence in the Midway, which I think might have something to do with it.
100%. I had always wanted to write a song about the Midway. Sandy, the Bruce Springsteen song, July 4th, Asbury Park, is one of my favorite songs. And I'd always dreamed about having a different perspective in that song. So that's where the seed of the idea came from. And I also wanted, there's a part of adolescence, or like of in the in between stages when you're like a brand new teenager, that we so rarely talk about. We always talk about being 17, but we don't talk about being 15, which I think is such a precious and important time where you're discovering so many new things.
Our guest today on the bridge is Amelia Meath of Sylvan Esso. And so this is where I get into a little bit of a danger ground, because I'm going to sum up your life for you to get to a point. But after that initial collaboration, you all sort of thought that there was more there. So you made that first record and it was almost like an experiment. And then you had to deal with making a second record, which is sort of, its own challenge. And towards, the end of that process, and maybe you can speak to why you did this, but you decided to teach those songs to some of your friends.
Indeed, we realized that a new way, because of the nature of how Sylvan Esso has, like, our record cycles usually last 2.5 years. Like we spend a year making a record and then we're out on tour for 2.5 years, and we play the songs over and over and over again. And we realized at the beginning of the second record that being able to rediscover the songs by teaching them to other people and recontextualize them in a different way led to touching more people and starting to understand the things that we were writing in a deeper way, and welcoming community into the thing that Nick and I do, which I, as kind of like a grumpus, was not very excited to do, because I'm a little bit too precious with, or originally I wanted when I feel fear about something, what I want is control, as opposed to when you make a band bigger, you're giving the keys, you're putting the hinges in people's hands, essentially.
Yeah, and it's not a small thing either, because so many of these songs were like built on a computer, and now you're asking people to play them on instruments.
Well, we're lucky we have friends who are as excellent of musicians as they are, who are excited to recreate programmed drum pieces on actual kits. It's really cool.
So this precious duo all of a sudden becomes a 10-piece. And although it took a little bit of time, you did put together a tour, and it was a small tour, but absolutely great rooms.
Thank you. That was we really wanted to get to play the sitting room, the seated rooms that we never get to play, mostly because Sylvan shows are so raucous anyway. And when we had conceptualized the idea, I think we thought that the band was going to be kind of snooty because we never had played seated venues before. So we were thinking like, okay, then everyone can sit because it'll be like, the music will be arranged. Of course, the with band is as energetic, if not more energetic than the Sylvan shows. So it was really fun to get to be in the Beacon or in the Walt Disney Concert Hall, places that Sylvan Esso, the duo, would never play.
And of course, that led to a live album and also a hour-long documentary, which you can find on YouTube. It's just brilliant too.
Oh, thank you.
The thing and the reason that this is all kind of like just recent history. A lot of this happened in 19, but the reason I wanted to talk about it was, you learned so much and you enjoyed the process so much, and then those 10 people go away and you made an even smaller, more intimate record. And I think it's just such an interesting choice. And when I say more intimate, it's sort of like you don't even really want it to seem like the two of you. You've sort of had the stated goal of making it seem like one entity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's an interesting take on it. I never thought about it. It's so funny to me too, when I think that when we were making Free Love, we knew that we were touching on something that was more earnest than what we had made, but we didn't realize that we were making an intimate record, or the reactions around it have been so fascinating, because to me it's the most bombastic record that we've made, even though I think like because of the nature of how Nick and I worked together, we just honed until like the base elements of what needed to be there was there, and that became a really intimate experience. Even though for me, like Numb or Train or Runaway, or so many of those songs are or Ferris Wheel, the most energetic songs that we've written. I think the record itself swings fully between the two poles of like pure intimacy and like wild raucous energy.
I think people are hearing your words, you know.
Mhm.
That's where a lot of that comes from. But you know, that sort of that one entity thing that's been a stated goal of the band at different points, I really feel like it's been a natural progression with the two of you as some of those lines in the studio have blurred and you have taken a more active role in production.
Indeed. Honestly, I think this is a new personal goal for me is doing a much better job at seeing the work that I do, because I think I was producing for the whole time. I just never realized that having an opinion about what the drums sound like is being a producer. I always thought what I was doing was making sure that the record sounded good. So, and then of course, like, and I keep on discovering that the curatorial work that I've been doing for this whole time are actually job titles. I just never it had never occurred to me.
You know, you had a conversation with Meryl from Tune Yards that helped you define all of this.
100%. Yeah. She really pointed out to me that what I was doing was production. Yeah.
Our guest today on the bridge is Amelia Meath of Sylvan Esso. New album, Free Love. It's just an amazing piece of work. It's a little bit different even in the way that it was made. Your first two records were made in your home, but you all have a new studio. And you were making this record, at least some of it in the studio, while the studio is still under construction.
Exactly. The studio got done perfectly. I think the studio was done the day we approved the masters of this record. So it's a little late in coming, but it's so miraculous to have a studio. It's called Betty's, named after your grandmother.
Your grandmother. I was going to ask about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a little bit different. You've also talked about wanting the albums to sound grounded in the space in which they're made. With this one, I guess, and maybe there are other examples of this too, but I get the feeling that you really built this studio with intent. And one of those pieces of intent was to have a space for you to dance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We really wanted, there are a couple of, I've always found studios to be really intimidating spaces, particularly when you're like, that you want to have the communication. You want to imbue a space with your creative energy in order to make a brand new thing that is an expression of who you are. And I find that a lot of studios just don't energetically lend themselves to that transition of power. From the artist to the engineer to, so when we designed Betty's, I wanted to make sure that it was a space that was full of light and that made recording as community oriented as possible. So it's actually one giant live room with the desk in the center. And there is one ISO booth, but the positioning of the hearing position is looking directly into the vocal booth with the band behind you. So like if you're producing the record, you're essentially a member of the band.
That's great. If you wanted to really just sort of brutally cut the content of Sylvan Esso songs down to a couple of topics, you might come up with love and dancing. And there are several songs that reflect the whole dancing thing. Rooftop dancing, that one's even in the title. You've described numb as shaking depression and apathy out of your body. But you also cast it along that long line of songs, and we don't get very many of them anymore. In the 60s, it was a thing, but songs that basically sort of described a dance, or, like the locomotion, or for God's sake, the twist, so do you have a specific dance like lined out for this song?
I don't yet. I've been trying to conceptualize it. Every now and then my dad calls me with suggestions. I like thinking of it as like an energetic, emotional dance instead of the simple steps. Um, yeah,
Well, I know that you've been, trying to master the art of cooking Indian food, but maybe you could take a small break from that to finish that dance for the rest of us so that we know how to dance when we come to the show post-COVID.
that's a really good idea. I think I definitely will. Soon, hopefully we'll have a music video in the works, and I'm trying. I've been like looking at different choreographers and thinking about who I want to work with.
Yeah, and do it with the little footprint diagram.
Exactly.
Yeah, that'd be good. Our guest today on the bridge is Amelia Meath from Sylvan Esso. The new album Free Love is out, and it's really great. I wanted to talk about a couple of things about it. Feels like it's just a reflection on how to love people. And you've said that there are 3 tentpole songs on the album. Make It Easy, What If, and Free. And I was wondering if you could just describe what makes them tentpole songs that sort of hold up the rest of the album.
Mm-hmm. I think those 3 songs really live in the same emotional space, even though they're about 3 different things. They're the progression of a thought pattern. The record opens on What If, which is basically about the idea of remembering that life begins with death instead of the other way around. And like just adding the circular nature into what life is in the beginning. And of course, it also deals with the themes of making a record and thinking about how, like, if you, particularly now when you automatically play something on a streaming service, it usually just loops over and over again. So trying to figure out how to work on making your record a circular thing, just as life is. Free does the thing, is the first really intimate, quiet moment on the record where you get to really lean in and hear an intimate thought, or it's the moment when all of the dust settles. Then you get to actually have a moment of self-reflection.
I could try and put the song into words, but you wrote it, so that would be a really dumb thing for me to do. But and I really would love to hear your description of it. But when you're in a relationship, it's impossible to share everything with the person that you're in a relationship with, and so you kind of create a special you for that person. Am I on the right track?
Absolutely.
It's such an interesting concept for a song, and I love the fact that you wrote it to begin with. But then there's also sort of, and I think it's almost a little meta, but the exchange of I love yous at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And it almost feels like there's like a double meaning involved too.
Indeed. I really wanted to keep that in. That's usually more intimate than I ever let people get in terms of Nick and I's relationship. But I realized that the thing that I really liked about it is that when I say I love you back, what I'm really saying is, okay, stop talking. I'm going to do the thing now. Like it takes on a different me. It's the I love you that you say to someone that you say I love you to 10 times a day, where like all of a sudden what it means is everything.
It's, I think in another interview, you said that I love you in this context is paraphrasing, shut up.
Yeah, 100%. Exactly. That's exactly what I say, or that's definitely what I'm saying in it.
That is so funny. You wrote that song really fast, and that's not necessarily the norm for you. Some of the songs on this record you've been working on for years.
Indeed. That was one of those magical songs that I need to remember, that I try to be constantly reminding myself that even when a song appears in the span of 6 minutes, I've probably been working on it for 10 years without noticing. Or I need to think that, because otherwise I'll just get so frustrated.
Amelia Meath of Sylvan Esso is our guest The album is Free Love. It's really a spectacular record, and I know that you're missing performing it live for us as much as we're missing watching you do that. And hopefully sometime next year you can get back out on the road and we can see you in person. But we do thank you for this. We take every little scrap we can get in, you know, at this point, and this feels like a breath of fresh air, and it's so meaningful. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I so appreciate it. It's just a joy to get to spend time talking about the record.
Amelia Meath of Sylvan Esso, the album Free Love. Thanks so much.
Thank you.